All right. Hey, welcome back to the Think Education podcast. It's been a while since we last recorded anything. But welcome back to any of you who are still out there listening. I'm Chris Hill, joined as ever by Judith Lammy. We've had some change, right, since last we met. You perhaps more so than me. I mean, I am still relatively new into my current job, and you are what now? Almost 2 months, is that right? I guess just
Yes,
about 2 months into your new world.
into my world of retirement.
Now, is it actually retirement? Because we've had this
Well,
conversation before that retired people are often busier
yes,
than fully employed
yeah,
people. Are you
it's
actually, do you think of yourself as retired?
I say it in the hope that my brain and the rest of me will get to realise that is the case. But I think I thought after what was something like 37 or so years that maybe it might be a good idea to slow down a little bit. So I have retired from full-time position. I'm delighted to still be an emerita professor at Swansea University, where I did have, a wonderful time as their pro vice chancellor. It was wonderful to work with them to, take them down new avenues when it came to international in particular, although of course it was also great to work with the people across a range of different activities, including home recruitment. And I had the privilege and pleasure of working with some wonderful colleagues there in the marketing and recruitment teams and the admissions teams. But I felt that a time had come when you reach a certain decade within your life, after a certain number of years, where you think, you know what, I think I might retire. But as you say, Chris, and as anybody out there who either works in universities or colleges or other types of academic institutions and our academic members of staff, you can't really, because a lot of what you do still actually continues, So I know that, so we thought it might be interesting for this podcast to talk a little bit about maybe careers, career development, these kind of careers that we found ourselves in.
Yeah.
Our last book, The Insider's Guide to Working in International Higher Education, sort of touched upon quite a lot of this, didn't it, really?
Yeah.
From those lofty ambitions of wanting to be truck drivers to ending up as vice presidents in places. Probably still wanted to be a truck driver, but realizing we can't drive quite that well. But also then to to the changes that take place as you go through your career. And for me now, the opportunity to still do our writing. So we're doing that. We're working on our latest tome with various people, and we're really looking forward to progressing that as usual. And I suppose I'm fortunate, but also looking forward to working in just a different capacity with something. So rather than completely not doing anything within the sphere of what I've been doing, I don't think I could do that anyway, Chris, because I've done it for so long. It would seem strange, to get up in the morning and just, go out for a walk. So, I'm really pleased that I've been an IC Global Fellow like yourself a number of years as well. So continuing to do that, and happy to do more with that and work with Sharon and the team and yourself and other colleagues on projects, as well as doing mentoring. I've done mentoring in a number of capacities for a number of years now, and always find that a delightful experience. You learn so much yourself, as well as hopefully being able to share some of the experiences that you've had, you know. So that's great. And then I'm really pleased to be an associate at Cormac's consultancy group. Known Charles Cormac for quite some time now. His company and his consultancy has been going for many years, for decades now. And he's done some, and they have done some really wonderful things, particularly within the areas of strategic partnerships, but more broadly in terms of international strategy development and implementation. And I suppose if there is one thing that I feel as though I should know about, albeit we can always learn, I understand that. But if you have been doing something, you know, in a dedicated fashion for the last 15 or so years, you should know a little bit about it. In which case, it's really great to be able to work with other colleagues across institutions, you know, across the world in different places where I think it's probably, you know, strategies are one thing, aren't they? And you know, you've been maybe talking a little bit about your role now. You're a little way into it, would be interesting, you know. But at an institution which, by its nature, is international, of course it is. It can't not be, can it? You know. But maybe hasn't had a dedicated focus on international strategy, global development, that kind of thing. But you can have as many strategies as you like, can't you? It's implementing it and the practicality of implementing it that I think sometimes we can bring to the table as well. So I've been responsible for writing and delivering a number of international strategies. I've done that in partnership. I've done that on my own, you know, in terms of authoring them. But when it comes down to it, you can have the most beautiful strategy in the world. It can be a glossy, it can be 2 pages, it can be 22 pages, or in the case of one of my institutions, I think it was 29 pages. I tried with 2 pages, that didn't work. But it's how you implement it. Otherwise, it's, you know, it's going to be pretty worthless. So that, I think, for me, that's the nice thing now. I can do some of those things that I have done over the years, but particularly now, you know, I can maybe have an opportunity to do some project work, some consultancy work, to keep my hand in with those areas and to make sure I keep up to date with things. But if I don't want to, and I do want to go for a walk and go and feed the ducks in the park, and you know, then I can do that as well, and that's quite nice.
It's interesting because one of my former bosses, Graham Kendall, when I was at Nottingham, Malaysia, he's remained in Malaysia the whole time I've been in Dubai, and he's had various posts. Most recently, Vice Chancellor of Milan University, and he just announced, I think yesterday possibly, or if not Sunday, that he was his time in that role had come to an end, and he was, like you, transitioning into the private sphere of higher education. And much the same as you know, writing, you know, thinking, consultancy, you know, supporting. And he like you, he put the list of all the positions he'd held. And I was wondering, maybe he had to retire because he'd completed the bingo card. Like he'd got, you know, DVC, PVC, VC, you know, and like, you're like, well, there's nothing, that's it, you've done, you've ticked them all off. So you've got to, and it's, you know, I'd often thought that when I worked in Malaysia, like what happened to the people at the kind of PVC level? Like where, you know, where did they go? And I remember when I was applying for those sort of jobs in Australia, so over a decade ago, and it wasn't like I was just being beaten, like I wasn't getting into the kind of, you know, the final conversations, etc. But I remember having a conversation with somebody that said, well, actually, a lot of the group of 8, they just rotate, you know, they kind of move, you know. And I remember thinking, well, where do those people go? Like, do they go up? Right? Because up is VC, right? Or president, or depending on, you know, what it's called, you know. Or do you take that experience and then move to another institution of your same home country, but in a different location, you know, with a different kind of agenda? Or do those PVCIs become provosts or vice chancellors of branch campuses, because like what that role, and obviously you've held those roles in institutions with differing strategies, right? Differing approaches, different kind of objectives. And I was wondering, particularly in light of the UK's recent internationalization strategy, like where you think this role might be going, because I mean, we can certainly come back to me after this, because I agree with you. Where I work in Dubai is a hugely international place,
Yeah.
but our internationalization approach collectively is very different from most other places, paradoxically. So I was just interested to see, where you thought this role, because there's no reduction in appetite from UK universities, particular, right? Nobody's saying, "Oh, we're done with internationalization. Let's just
no. I mean,
the opposite, right?"
If anything, it's the opposite, yes. And to try and take the politics out of the equation. I mean, it's an interesting, it's an interesting situation. I think that universities and people within these types of roles find themselves in. I see Global a few years ago wrote a short document on the role of the Pro Vice Chancellor International, and how you get there, its place at the senior table. I think it was written largely as well for people who might be looking at that kind of trajectory and thinking maybe that's something that is a potential for me to go down that route. So they're useful for those people that are listening. That's a and we'll maybe put a click through. That's useful. You could go and have a look at. But the situation that certainly the UK finds itself in now, I find it particularly interesting, given where the whole where sort of PVCIs or internationalization in many ways started, in the UK in these kind of roles. If you think of it 20 years ago or something, it was there were no PVCIs. There were weren't even international directors, actually. There were directors of international offices or heads of international offices. Directors you used a lot more, I think, about 20 or so years ago. Mostly they were heads of this, that and the other. And largely there were colleagues who had come through the professional service route, were experts in terms of marketing, recruitment, etc., very, very good at what they did. And the focus was on international student recruitment. Then people were talking a bit more about, well, isn't it to do with a little bit more than that? Maybe that's not important, but it could also be to do with partnerships, could be to do with reputation, could be to do with internationalization at home, which is when we started talking about that word rather than global word and globalization, which have then certainly different connotations. And so we sort of moved away from international recruitment in some ways to try and create, I think, a role and a pathway that maybe brought that in, but included a number of other things as well.
Right.
And I remember that that was when I had the role of Director of International Strategy at Birmingham. I think Andrea Nolan then, who was PVC up at Glasgow University, actually have been, I think, PVC for students and learning and teaching, that kind of a role, and had internationalization sort of tacked on the end. You had Steve Woodfield, who was, I think, one of the only other people in the UK that had the words international strategy in their title. I can't remember what it might have even been the British Council, but anyway, he's had head of international strategy. And there were very few others. There were other people that were having that kind of a role, but having it as part of the role they'd already got.
Right. Yeah.
But so there was a move away from that to try and include other things, but that it was in no way trying to diminish the importance of student recruitment, but it was trying to show that it was, about more than that. And then of course that grew over the years. It's not to go into, and we can come back to that path in a moment, but to catapult ourselves into the present. So then I think you probably find now that many UK institutions have got PVC internationals. They might be called PVC International, they might be called DVC International, they might be called DVC Global, they might be called Vice President Global, they might be called anything, any of these kind of words. But basically, and I've been a number of these things, and they've been called different things, but it's been the same job.
Yeah.
So basically, at the university, they lead on the international strategy, or the internationalization strategy, or the global strategy, or whatever. You get my point.
I do, yes.
So it's gone from, I think, most now institutions here certainly having these kind of roles, and that's probably, you know, the same in many, many other countries. But whereas then, and there's always been, I think, still a bit of tension, might be putting it, I don't know whether it's strongly or not strongly, but sometimes in those roles people have had international recruitment, sometimes they haven't. Sometimes the recruitment side of it is still, say, within professional services and still reported up into the COO, for example, or, you know, somebody that might be a head of a professional service on the executive, and sometimes the partnership side and the internationalization side has been elsewhere. You know, I suppose given what's happened over the last few years in the UK and the significant challenges that universities have in terms of bringing, you know, students to the UK to study, students who want to come here for whatever reason to study, students who are able to study, who are excellent, who have passed their qualifications, past what they should pass in order to be able to come, has become increasingly more difficult. That aspect of internationalization has become more difficult for institutions. We know that. There's been a lot written about that. No need to go into it. But I suppose what's then now is becoming probably even more important for institutions is the thing that we've been talking about for the last many years now, and that's transnational education and, you know, internationalization beyond where you are within the country that you're in, however you might define it and whatever the term might be. And so I suppose in sometimes people's rush to say, well, do these roles even exist anymore? And I've had people say that kind of thing to me, and it's been certainly impressed things like, well, we have these kind of, well, for many institutions, those roles don't deal with international recruitment anyway, actually. They deal with all the other things that we've been talking about in terms of partnership development, in terms of reputation development, in terms of any form of transnational activity. And you only have to look probably at UK institutions in terms of, you know, the numbers now that seem to be looking at TNE. This is a whole different conversation about why you might do that, what the motivations are, and what you think might be the benefits or otherwise. That's it, you know, something else again we can talk about. We certainly did talk about that in our last book too. But that seems to be something that people are thinking of, and I guess the profile of that then's been raised significantly. You know, if students are brought here, but they still want a UK degree. That's not saying that other degrees from other countries and other places aren't of equal footing, if not better, however you might determine that. But it's what people want. Somebody wants it and they can't come to the UK to get it, then maybe they would like to go somewhere else. And I think that is, so those kind of roles seem to be ones where the role of partnerships and T&E seems to be growing considerably. Of course, you know, then there are lots of other questions to ask there, aren't there, in terms of institutions? Why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? Do you have the internal infrastructure where you are to be able to cope with it? Do you have the quality measures in place? Do you have the risk appetite in place to do this? You know, all of these kind of questions. So I don't think it's meant that those kind of roles are no longer required. Far from it. But maybe they're actually just going to be termed as the kind of roles that they ended up being anyway, in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, kind of they evolve to reflect the thinking of the time, and often I think the thinking of the time is a little behind where those roles are. Because I agree with you. I think a lot of the time it's the articulation and kind of understanding or comprehension of what that type of role does. Because once you remove, or you don't remove, but once you accept the fact that international student recruitment is not necessarily a core element or at all element of that job role, because that at least has a metric that is very clear, success or fail, right? It has a direct impact on the bottom line of the institution. When you remove that, it's like, oh, well, what do you do? Oh, international stuff. Oh, recruitment. No. Well, then what's international stuff that doesn't have recruitment? And as you say, a lot of it is the way I kind of see, and I'm very much still learning what the job is, and to some extent developing it within my own institution, because I'm the first one here, which is pretty indicative of Dubai. It's not any commentary on my own institution. Where our internationalization approaches tends to be people come to us, right? And therefore, that the way of viewing that expansion is quite different. But a lot of the job seems to be working with academic and professional services, setting things up and then getting out of the way.
Yes.
And so stuff happens that you have been, if not fully responsible for, instrumental in getting it to a point, and then you just step out of the way, and then things happen. And so it's like, well, what did you do? Well, no, but what did you do? Well, there's nothing singular today, but you got a finger in a lot of different pies. But I think you're absolutely right that it's and we've tried to grapple with this idea in our last few books, and indeed in our next couple. What is a university? What's it for? What does it think of itself as, and what is it trying to do in the space that it occupies domestically and then internationally? I did a presentation a couple of weeks ago in Oman, and the topic was Global University for a Global Student. And I started out trying to define what a global university was, because I was like, I think I should know this, and I'm not really sure I do. And actually, something like 75% of the world's universities use the term global or international in their strategic documents.
Yes.
And you think, so 25% of us are not? Well, I'm almost more interested by what that means, because, and when you hear people interchange, oh, we're a global, international, transnational, you think, whoa, like those either all mean the same thing in the way you've said it, or all mean completely different things. And I'm not sure in context, I always understand the way people are using those terms, because arguably almost all universities are to an extent globalized, right? If they've got more than one nationality of student, they're international, and they've got, I mean, what is it, 99 point something percent of UK universities have got transnational partnerships in place. Yeah. There's, so it's almost like, well, we say it, and I keep coming back to that typology we put together in either book 1 or book 2 about partnership levels, and what that actually means. And yes, you're international because you've got a collection of these things, but what does that actually mean, and what does that actually do? And so I think it's sometimes you'll see titles where it'll say, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Global Engagement and Partnership, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's a very clear thing. My title, Global Engagement, you're like, well, what does that mean? Engage globally.
Yes.
And what's that? And then who's doing locally? You're like, well, local's in the globe, so it's all. But yeah, it's a kind of an interesting phase. And I like the point that you made, about when the distinction between international and transnational came. And so there is that inbound, outbound almost. And I mean, that is very much, reflected in the latest UK document, right? It is an outbound export engagement kind of. I read an article very, very briefly yesterday, which was saying about visas for international students going into Australia being problematic if that university offered a T&E option outside of Australia.
I think I read that as well.
And I did not read it. I mean, I skimmed it, so I need to go back and read it in more detail. but I thought, oh, that's an interesting,
Yes, that they
you know,
potentially must have both read the same article, that they potentially might on the border refuse entry or
yeah,
refuse a visa if that program is delivered
offshore.
by the same university
Yeah,
closer to your home, or
yeah,
certainly within your home country.
yeah,
That's, well, yes, that's a big decision to take,
yeah.
and is, yes, probably
Because
reflect
you know,
of
we've had many years, right, since the number of students on UK T&E programs outside of the UK exceeded the number of international students on programs in the UK. I mean, I can't remember how long ago that was, but with the way time in my memory works, that could be a
cross,
decade. I don't know, right? It's a
cross
long time.
a few
But
years ago.
it becomes an interesting, where internationalization and transnational education was for so long part of the same, not really understood, folded in together. And I think that led to a lot of people thinking T&E was just going to be the money maker that international students might have been perceived as or were. And now we're maybe moving into a very real disassociation of the two
Yeah.
ideas.
But it
Uh,
also, I mean, it also takes, it has no interest in what the student's own point of view is, does it?
oh,
And
no,
why
none.
studying. I mean, remember when we had that wonderful student who contributed to our previous book, Jason Akwabarara, who was
Yep.
from Zimbabwe, I want to say.
Mm.
And apologies if that's wrong. I'm thinking on my feet here. But what I do remember about talking to Jason and talking about his mother, talking with his mother, was that he was asked that question himself. Do you want to come to because he was doing this at COVID, at a time of
Yep.
COVID, when arguably a lot of people were deciding to stay at home and study remotely, because of all of the things that were happening around about that time. And Jason was like, no, I want to go. And it's not that he wanted to go and then stay somewhere forever, but he wanted that experience. He wanted to immerse himself in a learning experience in a different country, and that country happened to be Wales,
Yep.
and he could articulate why very clearly, and indeed he did extremely well in what was enormously challenging circumstances at that time. If you go somewhere, and then of course it was still at that point when there was limited interaction with people.
Yeah.
He knew that, but it was very important for him to start doing that because he wanted to continue, in that time, and he didn't want to. I think he termed it waste a year doing something else. He wanted to start as soon as he could. That was his choice. That was up to him. He was qualified to come and do it, just as he would have been qualified to go to any other institution. Indeed, so if there had been the opportunity, but we asked him this, didn't we? If you had the opportunity to study for this degree, on your own doorstep, would you have done it there? And he went, no, I didn't want to. I wanted to go elsewhere. And again, I think we also asked the student panels in our
We did.
our
Yeah.
previous books, didn't you? Would you want to do this? That isn't in any way to say that studying, on a branch campus of an institution isn't what a student might want to do. Of course they might, for again,
Yeah.
lots of other reasons a student might want to do that.
Yeah.
But just as you shouldn't be forcing somebody to get on a plane and go somewhere else, you shouldn't be forcing them not to. The likelihood is then, if you say, so these students, these people that are saying, well, you can't come here to this institution, will probably end up going somewhere else. They certainly won't go to that institution it's a different sort of opportunity,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is
No,
the world. Those people within our kind of roles, say the roles I've had in the past, the role that you've got now, and maybe the roles that people listening to this or others are seeing as part of their career trajectory. Is this something that I'm interested in doing is a I suppose, rather than giving it a title, which are always a little bit tricky, aren't they? Is having a position on an executive of a university that has, as part of its portfolio, got international.
Yes. Yes.
If that's your sort of thing that you want, then is this kind of the direction of travel that you're going in?
Absolutely. Yeah, and perhaps get used to the ambiguity that it is an evolving. And I mean, and to be fair, we've had these conversations before as well. When you interact with different functions within a university, there are, even within a single institution, very differing perspectives of what the university's for, and what's the value of students, and who's really important, and what is meant by international. Because increasingly you'll have, the decision to set up a branch campus is not a uniform decision, right? There's, it's not like, and there are often universities where there are departments within the university vehemently against the notion of setting up a branch campus, or teaching abroad, or changing their curriculum, or whatever it might, for whatever reason, good, bad, or otherwise, right? This is not a judgment issue. It's just kind of a reality of the way institutions, the decentralization often works. And so, an internationalization strategy is one thing, but actually a departmental buy-in is another thing entirely, right? So, it's an interesting space. Yeah.
About your role as well, though, doesn't it? About if somebody says to you, what have you done within that space, within, global engagement, within international engagement, at your institution? Well, it's like, well, in order very often for some of these things to actually happen, you need to get all of those people around that table to ensure that what you have as an institution decided you are going to focus on, and there will still be people that don't want to do the things that you've done, but you've decided it's there, it's in the strategy, it's in the plan, get over it, we're doing this now. But you then need to bring all of those people together to ensure that that's going to take place. And I think that is something that, I imagine that's the kind of thing in your role as well, that you have to bring people together from across your academic colleagues and then your professional service colleagues as well, in order to do that.
Absolutely. With varying levels of success.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably why it's useful when you're in these types of roles, if you have worked in different parts of the university.
Yes.
And you can appreciate, if not agree with, the different motivations, constraints, perspectives, etc. of colleagues, because in some cases it's like, well, no, I've just saw I actually saw two articles, one and then the response about the University of Nottingham Malaysia campus, and there was a report that went out talking about the financial return or lack thereof, and 20 something years in, and then a formal response from Nottingham saying, well, no, this is not the way it works. Like, it's done, there's a process, and there's a proper way of understanding this. And so there's always going to be varying perspectives within, particularly when you talk about risk appetite, when you talk about, and I mean, especially now, I guess, in the UK, where you've got the vastly diminishing capability of institutions at home financially.
Yeah.
Is international the solution, or don't do it at all?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do? I mean, we've had this conversation as well, haven't we? And I think when we talked to Paula, we touched upon it too, didn't we? That, if your home students aren't giving you enough of a return on your investment, if it's costing you more to teach them than it is, if your research isn't bringing you in money either, where are you going to get the money in to pay the bills and to pay the staff? have what you need in order to teach your students. You know, international is one way. Well, if you can't do that, then by bringing international students in and giving them a good experience and ensuring that they can have what they need by way, you know, which is obviously massively important, and ensuring that their employability is at the forefront of your mind as well, not just your home students. If you can't do that, then one other thing that you might be able to do is, you know, offshore delivery of your degrees, but it will have a different financial base to it.
Yeah.
And then it will come down to your risk appetite, won't it? Because if you want to do exactly the same thing that you do when you're in whatever institution you are in the UK, but wherever you are, and you want all of the staff to teach it the same, if you want the delivery to be the same, if you want all of that exactly the same, then it will cost you a massive amount of money. You won't be able to do it. So you are going to have to find different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
But that's also, you have to respect other people's systems. I mean, how many times have we heard people say, well, I don't know about this partner. I mean, are they going to be as good as us when it comes to teaching? Are they going to have the, you know, the capacity to do this? Are they going to have the environment where they do it? And you want to say, well, go out and have a look at the institution. Then very often they'll go and they'll realize, you know what, however you might term this, it's not only on a power with our home institution, but it's a lot better actually.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are ways in which, I suppose a lot of that then comes down to, and we've talked about this a lot before, haven't we, about the importance of partnerships.
Yes.
Getting the right partner, and getting a partner where you respect each other, but getting a partner where, you know, you, in terms of quality, in terms of, you know, capacity and capability, you know, there's a good match there.
Absolutely.
You just have to trust as well.
It's interesting because I mean, I think we'll talk about partnerships proper on another call, but I mean, I've had so many conversations with mirroring what you've just said. So you've got the established university saying, yeah, I don't think I'm going to go partner with the tin pot. That doesn't really make sense. And then particularly when I was working in Southeast Asia, kind of the directive that came from many institutions was, we need to partner with the global 100.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's not going to happen. For a start, the global 100 don't need to partner with anybody reasonably. I mean, they may want to, but they don't. The need is not the same way, and the mismatch, you know, and therefore the power dependency is going to be so significant. They're not really going to do anything. Now, if you having the global 100 institution attached to your institution in and of itself, that's currency. So sure, there's success there. But if you're talking about student experience, if you're talking about genuine impact to the university or the community or output, find somebody within, you know, that's similarly structured, but has the thing that you don't have, and you have the thing that they don't have, and do that, or at least try to do that, right? So, yeah, I think the nature of partnerships, similarly to the way we use the word internationalization or transnational, you know, it's a thing. Let's have that. Okay, why? And I think it comes back down to this question again and again. Why? What's the central purpose behind? What are you trying to achieve? Why are you engaging with this? And how long do you have before you need to understand what you've actually done? Because they're all very important components.
Absolutely. And if you don't have, I think, coming back almost full circle where we sort of started, if you don't have somebody at your senior table and then at the tables of your senior teams across your professional services, across your academic faculties and colleges, if you don't have a person there almost championing that, having that as their area of responsibility, who raises those questions and who puts things forward, then I think very often, you know, you either won't achieve what you want to achieve in terms of your ambitions, or you might, you know, if you're not careful, start going down into a direction or doing something that ultimately will not be as beneficial as you thought it might be. to begin with.
Yeah. So what character from Pinocchio does that make the PVCI? Is that it's the better angel? It's the like which one of the two, you know, that's whispering the little
I don't know. I always go Wind in the Willows when I think of characters and things.
what would it be from Wind in the Willows?
I don't know. I just because there's always the right characters in Wind in the Willows.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? There's always something. There's always somebody there. I don't know. I'm just having a look.
So we have to
I was hoping it's not going to be Pinocchio.
No, sure. No. It's like what is it? Is it, you know, there's nothing so fine, no fine in the world as messing about in boats. That's Wind in the Willows, right? So if, instead of boats, we just put international. There's nothing so fine as messing about. Yeah, in the globe. Yeah.
Sort of. There's always somewhere you're going, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, there you go. So the PVCI, DVCI, international, whatever we want to call it, or are calling it, is clearly fundamental, even if we can't necessarily define what it is, what it does, but we'll know it when we see it. But in many ways, it's that not voice of reason. That sounds way too grand, but it is very much it's the voice, a voice in. Yeah.
There's a reason why universities across the globe decided that they wanted somebody in this kind of position, in that kind of position, to be able to help lead, you know, the strategy around that, but also to be that voice, you know, just as you have a voice for research or for innovation, or for student experience or for learning and teaching and curriculum development, you know, all of the things are important. They all interact with each other, and you will have experience that comes through that route that you can bring to the table. No one of them is any more important than the other, except possibly with the exception of the student experience, which is the most important. Or because you haven't got any students, well, yeah, probably not a university, but that's a different book. You can have
for another day. Yeah.
You can have the evolving nature of universities for a whole debate and book on that one.
Yeah.
But I suppose coming back to the point that you also raised in terms of certainly in the UK with the change in the international education strategy, are the kind of roles there needed and wanted? Absolutely, I think, but they will be different and they will evolve just like everything.
Just like everything else.
They will just, in many ways, be the kind of roles that they probably primarily always have been. Just articulated maybe a little bit more clearly, but that still doesn't mean that you might not be doing lots of other things that also have nothing to do with international. For those of you looking forward to being on executives of universities, and that is a complete pleasure of it all. You never quite know what you're going to be doing if you're a PVC, DVC, Vice President, International, Global.
Yeah, which is probably why it works for you and I. We, much like the job role as the podcast, as the writing, you never really know what's going to happen or where it's going to go. Yeah. But hey, it's nice to be back. So,
yes,
wonderful. All right. Well, then next time, I guess we'll think about partnerships and we'll think about collaboration and we'll think about all those other issues. But it's great to be back, and let's see how many more we can do. All right. Okay. That's done.